Now let's talk Texas A&M. Let's talk Mike Elko. Yeah, if you didn't know, I am an Aggie, so this is a little close to home. But with that being said, I'll let you start.
I'll try to give the unbiased opinion. I know you'll keep it professional here. I
That's what I'm saying.
know
That's why I'm saying you should start. Not that I try to look at this holistically and unbiasedly, but that's why I'm offering it to you as a surefire unbiased voice.
it was a kind of weird hiring cycle with this A&M job. It opened in was that mid-November or early to mid-November, and then it was weird. It sounded like they were gonna have Stoops from Kentucky, and then all of a sudden, like less than 24 hours later, it ended up being Mike Elko. And I do think we talked about it when it happened. Like I was a fan of Mark Stoops. I do think Mike Elko gives you a little bit more upside there, just because of his familiarity with A&M. I think like obviously the paycheck is awesome and it's life changing for him and his family and anyone else he brings along with him and his staff from Duke. But he knows that organization. Remember, he was there not too long ago when they were having that 10-2 season or 11-1 season in 2020. Or I'm sorry, it would have been 9-1 because only played 10 games that year in the regular season. He knows it. He knows how to win. He talked about it in his interviews, right? When he went on with Feinbaum and Pat McAfee's show, he was like, I know what it takes to win there. And I know, more importantly, I know what it takes not to win there and to fix some of the corrections and why they haven't been winning at an elite clip, like a program with the resources that A&M, albeit recently, has had, but they do have there. I think a little disappointed he couldn't keep Elijah Robinson. I get it. He left with his best friend to go coach at Syracuse, right? Like it's once in a lifetime opportunity. I get that. Happy for him. Obviously, it will be missed. You saw the effect. You see LT Overton in the portal. You see Walter Nolan potentially going to the portal. You got to keep Stewart. You got to keep Turner. You got to keep some other guys there. Diggs and everyone else there on the D line. I think Mike Elko can do it. You've seen some guys in the transfer portal. I haven't seen Stewart yet. Everyone's talking about him, expecting him to go, but he's still there. He's still tweeting like he's an A&M guy. I don't know. I think in the short term, this is probably one of the better hires you can make because he could keep that roster together. And I think that mattered for the boosters there because they did, invest a lot in a big time recruiting class the past couple of years. And you'd like to see a little bit of return on that investment. I think long term, though, it's still going to end up well. He is a culture guy. He's won everywhere he's been. I mean, he recruited well at Duke. He developed well at Duke. They were competing in games. It was Mike Elko was a hot topic, a hot name. If he wasn't at A&M, he would have been somewhere else pretty high. I think him and Jonathan Smith were two of the higher candidates in terms of guys that you assume to potentially be on the market.
To take that
And
next
as
step.
a yes, exactly, yeah. Obviously, like if you're a guy like you're going to hire Nick Saban or Brian Kelly, like that was never going to be a realistic possibility for anyone, right? Let alone A&M. But I think he nailed. He's done a really good job on his coaching search and his coaching staff. I'll let you talk about that a little bit more. Real quick, I do want to talk about Colin Klein. That was the big hire today. That's a guy that has been rumored for as many offense coordinator jobs. There's kind of been open because everyone wants him, especially at the high Power 5 level. You talk about Notre Dame and Penn State wanted him badly, and Penn State has had good offenses and has had offensive coordinators go on to do really good things, right, or get elevated into higher roles for sure. And obviously Notre Dame, you look at Tommy Rees was just there. That was a big time job. And he turned it down. He was staying at his alma mater in Kansas State. If you remember, that's the same guy that was in the Heisman race with Johnny Manziel just 10, 11 years ago, right? Like this was a home run hire. This could not have been, a better hire for them. I don't think. Maybe Ryan Grubb, maybe, but even Colin Klein, I think he fits what they want to do so well. Him and Mike Elko are going to pair so well. Wigman, I believe, is a good fit there. I would love to see, right, Ryan Leonard come over from Duke, but I don't think that's going to happen just because of how similar like him and Colin Klein were as players. And you saw guys like Will Howard, you saw guys like Adrian Martinez have success and thrive in an offense like this. But he's brilliant. He can recruit, he can develop, he can scheme up plays. They're running, they're pin and pull. It's just incredible. I watched a couple some film on Colin Klein's most creative stuff, and it's just incredible how he stacks plays, how he gets guys open. And like I think what we haven't had at A&M in a while is just elite coaching, top to bottom on your coaching staff. And I think that's what Mike Elko's doing for you. And I think that's part of the reason why he was hired, because yes, he can recruit there. Anyone can recruit at A&M for the most part, right? Maybe not at the top 1, top 2 level, but at the top 10 level, enough to compete nationally for sure. But it's up to those coaches to develop and put those guys in position, which you just severely lacked on both sides of the ball, right? And I'll let you get into it now, but I think it's so far he has done a really good job.
I agree. I'll talk about like some of the staff other than Colin Klein that he's brought on, which by the way, I agree with the Colin Klein hire is awesome. And we'll see what he does with Wigman. And also too, like it opens the door for like a guy like Jalen Henderson, who's mobile, big, like kind of like Colin Klein, kind of like you know, two quarterback system over there that they ran over, and Martinez, yeah, two quarterback system that they ran over there at Kansas State. So I agree with that a lot. And also, he gets to do it on his own. He's not going to have another coach in his ear. He gets to bring on some of his staff. The other staff that Mike Elko's putting together, right? Defensive coordinator, we don't know yet. Are they retaining DJ Durkin? Is there going to be another defensive coordinator hire? I hope there's another defensive coordinator hire. I really do. Granted, a lot of players really like DJ Durkin. As long as Mike Elko has his fingerprints on the defense, I would be okay with DJ Durkin on staff if it means keeping a lot of those players. But long term, I think I'd like another defensive coordinator. You hired Adam Cushing as your offensive line coach, brought him over from Duke. I think that's a very good hire. We know that Steve Adazio has not worked out there. A&M fans will tell you he was the first guy that you were hoping is out the door after the season. And he was, along with Jimbo and a few others there too, Damian Craig. Yeah, he's done a great job at Duke for what he's had. He's developed some good ball players, some NFL ball players that he's had there at Duke. That's really impressive to me. Sean Spencer is the one that I think is, I wouldn't want to say polarizing. It's a little he's not Elijah Robinson, right? And Elijah Robinson is probably, well, him and Fran Brown are probably the two best recruiters in the country, like right now, if you were to ask me, two of them. And him leaving definitely hurts.
Awesome there at Syracuse. I mean, yeah, that's a really good duo.
That's kind of dynamite there for Syracuse, by the way. Elijah Robinson. So, look, if Mike Elko doesn't want Elijah Robinson calling a defensive coordinator, I'll trust Mike Elko in that aspect. It does hurt a little bit. A guy like LT Overton, who A&M fans for some reason were like, whatever. LT Overton, you're forgetting he is like 19 years old. Like 18, he was a freshman last year at 17. He reclassified up a year and was still a 5-star. Like he just hasn't had his time yet because a lot of these guys are more developed than he is. Like he is going to be a monster. Wherever he ends up, he will be a monster. I can guarantee you that. So that is a loss, I think, for A&M. But Sean Spencer, hiring him away from Florida, well, he got fired from Florida. Probably just one of those how do you call it? Sometimes you got to shake things up when you're in a bad spot. You know,
like a scapegoat.
Yeah.
Now it was the blame partially on him for sure, but he's done some good things there as a recruiter for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of defensive line, right? Having a guy that develops, and I don't know if Sean Spencer is that guy exactly, but he can recruit at a really high level too. So if you're worried about his recruiting, you really shouldn't be, right? Because look, he's recruited guy. He recruited Michael Parsons at Penn State, Adafe Owe, Yetur Gross-Matos, PJ Mustipher, and for those of you guys who don't know, a little fun fact: he was the primary recruiter for Saquon Barkley there. So to say that he can't recruit and evaluate talent very well, it is pretty criminal to say that. So he's fine. He's going to be just fine. It was a good hire. Mike Elko had him in the bags. He knew that there was a contingency plan if Elijah Robinson left, and I thought it was a pretty good one. So I'm okay with that hire. And then, like you said, Colin Klein, unbelievable. Transfer portal, though, so far, because with all these coaches, we talked about staff, we talked about transfer portal. Transfer portal, Max Johnson goes to the portal. Not a surprise at all.
His brother,
became
too.
A graduate. Yep, and his brother, Jake Johnson, the tight end.
That's
as
a big
well.
one, I think.
Yes, it's a big one, but also Max Johnson was not going to be the starting quarterback next year. He might not have even been the second string quarterback, to be honest, based on how Jalen Henderson played and what Colin Klein wants to run there. At the tight end spot, you still got Donovan Green, right? You still got Orstrom from Sweden, stud there. So you got some guys still in the tight end room. Donovan Green just gotta get healthy, please. And then on the other side of that of the ball, Jordan Gilbert transfers safety. Honestly, had been overtaken on the roster by some of the younger guys. So he'll go somewhere good. He'll go somewhere probably Power 5 and play. But he was a good football, or he's a good football player. He would have been good depth for sure. And then, like you said, LT Overton. If Walton Nolan goes in the transfer portal, that's a gigantic loss along with LT Overton. And then it just leads you to wonder, like, who else, right, is going in the portal. But I think we thought that there was going to be a greater transfer portal exodus up until this point, especially on the offensive side of the ball when Jimbo Fisher got fired. To see Evan Stewart still there, to see Connor Wigman still there, to still see basically the entire starting offensive line still there, not including, Moko and Strickland, the backup guards in the portal. I still think it's fine. And the recruiting class, for the most part, staying intact. Sure, you lose Cam Coleman. It's going to happen sometimes. Big-time recruits like that are just going to flip when they see a big coaching change, right? But candidly,
that was
Cam
coming
Coleman,
for a while, I think, too. He also flipped back to in-state Auburn like that, and they've also been flipping hella players from Florida, from Alabama. They're looking to get a guy from Florida State and KJ Bolden. Hugh Freeze is lighting it up on the recruiting chair right now. If you're upset about Cam Coleman, like you said, fairly so. I'm obviously he'll probably be a really dynamic player for him, but like that happens when you recruit against high level players. Like you're going to lose recruiting battles for sure.
yeah, absolutely. So, what are the expectations for A&M? This is debated all the time. I will give my expectations as a fan. All right. And then I will allow Christopher to give his expectations as well. As a fan, all right, as someone that has seen a number 1 recruiting class, consistent top 10 recruiting class, your geography is in the state of Texas, you play in the SEC, right? With all that in mind, the expectation is that any coach that we bring in could potentially win a national championship. Not saying that that's every year. What is it year to year? It's 9 wins. How about 10 wins? That's something that Jimbo never did. He never won 10 games, believe it or not. So like that is the expectation. And Jimbo was not meeting that expectation. He was not doing that. So is it 10 wins every single year? Not necessarily. Could he build a program to that point where he is winning 10 games, 9-10 games every single year? Absolutely. But 7-5 doesn't cut it anymore. 8-4 does not cut it anymore. 9-3, that's what you're kind of looking at. That's what the expectation is. So, sorry if that's a crazy fan talking, but just with all those resources and your geography, even with the history, I don't care, right? Sometimes like programs, historically A&M has not been a winning program, but you got to remember all these resources came in after Johnny Manziel, right? So we've had 10 years of maximum resources, like tier 1 resources. We've had 10 years of it. That's it. And we've hired one coach in that time and he did not work out. That does not mean that A&M cannot be an elite program at all.
Can I add on at that point? With all that funding, like there is a power grab up, and I'm not going to pretend to know the ins and outs of the upper tier funder donors and the high level, or at the high level, the football program of A&M. But like it's hard to organize that and to get boosters and a staff and an athletic department like all into one synergetic triangle. Like you talk about Alabama had that problem for like 20 years. They had that problem, 15 years, and then Saban came in. And he figured it out. And I think Mike Elko is a guy to do that. And yes, he doesn't have the reputation that Nick Saban did nationally, but I think he's a respected guy in there. And I think he understands like, hey, I have to tell this guy to F off, or I have to do this from this guy, or whatever it is. Like, I think he understands that.
Yeah, absolutely. So where do I grade this higher?
Like, real quick, can I give my expectation?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. We still haven't gotten to your expectations.
Yeah, I do think in the short term, like 9 wins is an absolute Like next year, I think you turn around with this roster, as long as you don't have mass exodus to the portal or big time quarterback injury, like 9 wins. I'm looking at their schedule right now. You talk about like key games: Notre Dame, LSU, Texas. Right, those are games where you're going to be at a legit, probable even talent level. You're probably going to have a little bit more talent than Notre Dame, maybe a little less than Texas, depending on what happens there. But like those are all games that you should. They're all at home, by the way. They're all at home. Yeah, I don't know. I think with the schedule it shakes out, like he's going to be expected to win 9 to 10 games. To me, as an outside guy, Big Ten guy, when I look at A&M, I see them as the Penn State of the SEC, and I mean that in a compliment, right? Like you should be beating teams that you should be beating, and they have not been, and that was the downfall of Jimbo Fisher, the undisciplined that bled into games where you lose to Mississippi State all the time. You lose to Ole Miss when there was a massive talent gap, right? Where you were getting outcoached time in and time out against teams you should not be getting outcoached by. You lost to Auburn last year, who was terrible and just ran the ball and punted and won in that game. To me, Mike Elko has to go 9-0 against everyone on his schedule that he should beat pretty easily, right? 8-1, fine. I'll give you a blemish here or there. I get it. It's hard, to run the table in the SEC. And then you got to be splitting with teams, or maybe at a 40% clip with the upper level, Alabama's, Georgia's, Texas's, LSU's of the world in the SEC. I think with a 12-team playoff, you should be making the playoff once every 4 years, once every 3 years. Once you get cooking, it should be 3 every 4 years. If you are Mike Elko here and you're stacking recruiting classes and you have good coaching staffs, you got the quarterback right. Like you said, this team has the potential, not the current team as it's constructed. The program and the coach has the potential to win a national championship. And I think Mike Elko can. I really do. I really think he can. Yeah, but my expectation would be 9 wins, but don't like lose to Mississippi State all the time, and don't lose to Florida when you shouldn't lose to them, or don't lose to Auburn or South Carolina when you have a massive talent gap. Like, yes, like I get it. It's hard in the SEC to go week to week and to beat these teams. It's only getting harder with the addition of Texas and Oklahoma, and the recruiting battles are getting more intense. There's good coaching everywhere in the SEC. Beat the teams you should beat, right? Beat the teams you should beat. And then you can figure out, like Penn State, right? The reason I compare to them is they beat everybody else except Ohio State and Michigan, which they are underdogs in those games. I get it doesn't look pretty. I think A&M has the talent gap, has a talent level that Bama and Texas does have. So they can compete. So it's a little bit higher expectation and higher ceiling than Penn State, but your floor should be Penn State, right? Like, is that fair? Does that seem fair?
Absolutely fair. Absolutely fair. So in terms of grade, what am I going to give this hire? Based on what he's done with his staff, right? And I like Sean Spencer, I think, more than a lot of other people do. They're like, oh, got fired from Florida. I'm like, could that also be Billy Napier just rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic as well? Yeah. Like, who knows? So I like the staff. What he's done in transfer portal so far is fine. He's busy doing recruits, whatever. But I like this hire a lot. I'm going to give it an A-. I think he can exceed expectations. I think he could win the SEC. I think he could potentially win the national championship. I think that's just what could happen. So I'm not saying it will happen. For all I know, he could totally underwhelm. And we'll see him being a solid defensive coordinator in the SEC somewhere next
A
4
really
years.
solid.
Like a really solid, yeah. So I don't know. I like this hire a lot. I'll give it an A-.
For me, I'm going to go a B+. I'm just a little bit lower on it, more so because I personally believe that this job is just such an elite job in college football. And I get it's easier said than done. But you look at USC and what LSU did last year, and obviously USC, it's maybe not working out like you thought it would right now. Obviously, things can change. And Lincoln Riley's a fantastic coach. I'm not too worried about that in terms of the long-term success of that program. But they went out and they hired like elite coaches at elite programs in high level college football. And I was kind of hoping for that. You heard some names be floated around with, obviously Dan Lanning was probably a stretch to begin with, but I was hoping that there was going to be some, win the press conference kind of hire. And I get like the flashy hire. It's not always the best hire, but I do think like there were some names that I wanted to shake out in and it didn't quite shake out. But that being said, I think the floor of this program has been raised significantly. And just because it's not a flashy hire nationally does not mean that it's not a good hire. I think this is a really, really good hire. B plus is a pretty darn good grade, especially at a school with the expectations of Texas A&M. You could have gone really, really wrong with this hire, and obviously we'll see how it turns out. But to be honest, I don't see a way, unless he gets totally overwhelmed of being a major head coach and high level college football. I don't see this being a disaster. Now, can it be a little bit underwhelming where if he gets capped out at 8 to 9 wins or nine wins, like maybe, but I see the floor being just super, super high. And I think that's a really good spot to start with A&M, and the talent level and the coaching level that he can bring in can get you through that roof and get you through to the playoffs and then the national championship as well.